Okay. Oh, great. That makes us feel a bit less lonely on the stage. I do not know how many participants do we have online. Is that possible to know? Okay, then just welcome to everybody, to those I can see and to those I hope which are joining us on the internet connection. Welcome to this first session of the 2021 forum, which we dedicated to place-based strategies and interventions for social equity. We choose to repropose this argument as it has already been the focus of a session, so I think 2 years ago, because it continues being an important, or this increasingly, there's an increasing awareness about the fact that it is an important issue, as we also heard this morning from Margareta and from other participants. And so why is it important? We know that societies which take care for equity inside the society and take care for not leaving anybody behind are those who are also economically more successful. And in the same way, we know that we cannot be resilient or without taking care that everybody in society is resilient. And at the same time, we are well aware about the fact that impacts are not the same for all members of society. Climate impacts and other impacts are more severe in some areas. And these are sometimes also areas where people live because of their social position. Or they are more difficult to deal with because of their social position independently from where they live. For instance, to deal with heat, to deal with disruptions and events like that. And one occasion which made us aware of, or made these differences very, very difficult, very, very visible, was the COVID-19 event. So there, the disproportionate burdens women, for instance, took during the pandemic, the problems families had who lived in very small, in the lockdown, in very, very small dwellings and so on. So there was a lot of awareness about where you could not go far from your dwellings because, and so you had very in need of green areas close to the to your dwellings. Such inequalities, and sometimes they were aware and sometimes they were not, became quite obvious. So one idea was to connect also to this sort of our session, also to this sort of experience, and to learn what had been done, which sort of consciousness has been raised during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm very happy to have with us online two participants. One is Ruth Wolstenholm from the Sniffer, which is she's the managing director of Sniffer, which is a Scottish charity which is working on equity issues in climate policies since several decades, and she in first person, but also her organization has been instrumental for the delivery of the Scottish adaptation strategy and the climate ready Clyde. And I would like to give the word to her to learn what has concretely been done in the Glasgow context in order to increase the awareness and the respect of social justice policies in a climate strategy. So if Ruth can hear us, could she please? Oh, hi. Good morning,
Thank
Ruth. How are
you.
you?
Great to see you, and I'm so sorry I can't be with you in Malmo.
Yeah, it is
I'm sure much nicer than rainy Scotland, where I currently am. Maybe I can just set the context a little bit about what we've been doing in the Glasgow City region. So we're facilitating a partnership called Climate Ready Clyde, which is a collaboration between a number of organisations, particularly public sector organisations, local authorities, Scottish Environment Protection Agency, Nature Scot and others, and universities, really addressing how the city region can adapt to climate change. But this is quite a large area, there's 1.8 million people, so it's not particularly straightforward in terms of how best to address social justice. But what we've been doing is developing a climate change adaptation strategy and an adaptation action plan that actively seeks to create a more fair, just and inclusive Glasgow City region. And this strategy is designed to be a catalyst and a call for action for organisations, communities and businesses to come together and to align existing policies and strategies around that, to embed adaptation into those things and also to develop new adaptation actions as well. And the Climate Ready Clyde partners are really clear that we must ensure that the impacts of climate change don't fall disproportionately on the most vulnerable in the region, and that the activities to adapt also seek to reduce the existing inequalities and vulnerabilities. So this is quite a new strategy. It launched just in June, developed during COVID, which itself was not without its challenges, but a really great example of co-production of the strategy with our partners and a number of organisations. So we're now at the early stages of implementation of the strategy.
Can you illustrate us with some examples where your action actually triggered, where you started working on concrete measures to enhance justice and fairness in adaptation?
Okay, so as I said, this is very much the strategy, not yet, it's just moving into the implementation phase. But I think what's important with the strategy is that it's the flagship actions that we've pulled together, which take a very much a systems approach. So rather than having an adaptation strategy that is sectoral and trying to work, say, for example, land use or transport alone, it sets out to bring organisations, communities and businesses together to address the systemic challenges of climate change, and thinking about how to reduce the inequalities as part of that. So that I think that's what sets it aside in terms of taking a systems approach and thinking about distributive justice, procedural justice, intergenerational justice as part of those flagship actions. So those actions recognise that physical changes aren't enough. And what's really fundamental is thinking about the need for new governance mechanisms, new forms of financing, new structures, new ways of empowering communities. So within those flagship actions, that's the intention. So, for example, there's a flagship action around communities being ready to be part of climate ready placemaking. And the sorts of things we're doing there are bringing together organisations, community-facing organisations in particular, such as the Government's Improvement Service, Public Health Scotland, Architecture and Design Scotland, who are already working with communities on social justice, but actually now starting to bring adaptation into those actions as well.
Obviously, participation and interacting with citizens has not been an easy task during the COVID-19 pandemic, but I'm wondering, you had direct interactions also with the persons directly interested, and would like to know, how did you find them, select them, with which criteria did you go to see who is actually more affected by injustice, by lack of equity or fairness, and to get these voices heard?
Yes, So in one sense, in developing the strategy, it's been important to work with the organisations that have that remit of working with communities and developing the policies that will impact on communities themselves. So that was very much part of the process as well. But in terms of your question about how we interacted directly with communities, we did that during COVID as part of developing the adaptation strategy. And actually one key approach was to work with creative practitioners. So we had a close collaboration with Creative Carbon Scotland, who brought in groups such as Big Arts, which is a community-based organisation that works with disadvantaged communities through means of cultural practice. And we had workshops with them and several others to help shape what was important in the strategy itself. So it's not so much about involving them at this stage in the implementation of the strategy, but about saying what matters to people, how can we develop the means for empowering communities, how can we create those mechanisms where leadership is developed from beyond the public sector, and how do we bring society into the decision-making processes. And I think the role of creative practitioners there, even online, has been really helpful in terms of bringing in new voices, changing the language, thinking differently about what climate-ready places looks like with communities and how we would get there. So that's been one example of where we've worked with those community-facing organisations to bring in those different perspectives.
Does that mean that a complete change of the view one does have on vulnerability is needed for if a vulnerability analysis is made? Would you suggest?
Yes, I think it's probably had a big influence in terms of the procedural justice element of things. It's about how to involve people in the decision making in terms of resource allocation, in terms of protection from flood risks. And I think that's been very valuable insight. I mean, obviously there's a lot of work in parallel, which is bringing in the scientific evidence base around distributed justice. So who are the most impacted? Scottish Environment Protection Agency has maps of flood risk and disadvantage. So there's a lot of knowledge in terms of where vulnerability is, but in terms of how that's addressed, it's been helpful to bring in these different perspectives. But it's also been really helpful to bring together the different types of institutions that need to work together to resolve this. Because I think one key thing about taking a more just and inclusive approach is that it needs to be collaborative. We need to find collaborative ways of addressing it. Just resilience is a systems challenge, and it can't be addressed by one policy working in isolation. We need to bring together and integrate those different policy interests. So, for example, we have a Community Empowerment Act. We have a lot of people working on that side of things, focus on well-being, obviously things to do with flood risk management and placemaking. And it's really helpful to bring those together. And a place-based approach is a really valuable way of doing that, because it brings the focus as to what are the systemic challenges and how can we address those through a more joined-up collaborative approach, and how can we make those approaches more inclusive, rather than thinking about just individual policies being implemented in isolation from each other. So I think there's a lot here about the process of engagement and how that process then takes account of different interests and the trade-offs that inevitably are there, and also how do we look at the synergies and potential conflicts with other agendas, such as net zero. How do we bring that in? And I heard your question from the earlier session about sustainability and resilience. And so how do we think of those, the whole picture, and not thinking about adaptation as a sort of physical response in isolation?
Obviously, thank you. Yes, I think this is already a very good message for informing local policies, concentrating on space, collaborating, and the call for civil society, as Margareta already made it in the session previously. Luca, are there any questions for Ruth from the public?
Right now, not.
Okay.
But
okay, so then we'll come back to you later. I would like to pass the word to Iva Bedenko and Matija Vugar, who are from the city of Zagreb and working with the city of Zagreb and working with a very special project on urban gardening. But I would like to give the floor to Iva then, please.
Thank you. Do we get up or can we?
You can remain there. Okay.
Okay, I would just like our presentation. Okay, so.
Okay, I will give a short introduction. I'm Matija Vugar from the city of Zagreb. Zagreb has 800,000 inhabitants, medium-sized southeastern European cities. Have a lot of, let's say, green spaces, green areas, but also suffer from post-industrial time period. Beside the pandemic, Zagreb also felt, we heard today, some disasters. So earthquake happened also in Zagreb. So we have a lot of challenge, and in a period in front of us, we are from the Office of Strategic Planning. So we work with a master plan and also with a spatial plan. So it is great focus on a spatial plan, and also we are talking a lot on spatial plans of next generation. How do they look like, and also how to integrate green MBSs, green infrastructure, and digitalization in that plan for the future generation. Within this project that was mentioned, it's a project, and we are working on our living lab in Sesvete, and urban garden is part of it. So Iva will continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Matija, for the introduction. We prepared a slideshow with only photos just to give you an overview of the city and of what we are doing, because it's a very concrete intervention. So we are not talking about policy. This is above our power. We are working on implementing some very specific nature-based solution with social extra quality. So as Matija said, Zagreb is this middle-sized South European city which is surrounded by nature, with the mountain on the north of the city and a river crossing the southern part, and green areas are penetrating deep into the city tissue. So this is a very strong basis for successful green infrastructure. Some 8 years ago, the city of Zagreb has decided to start using some unused areas that are owned by the city, but which are planned for future development, for future residential areas and such, but that have not been in use. They were sort of derelict land, and following a bottom-up approach, the city was approached by some NGOs that were interested in city gardening, and together with the city of Zagreb, they devised this urban gardens project to give new life to these, at least temporarily, to these areas. So here you can see this is the city of Zagreb, and the green dots with the numbers and the red one are the sort of peripheral areas where the city gardens are. So the City Gardens project has turned out to be a success because it was, I guess it was planned on sound basis. The city gardens, at the moment there are 14 city gardens with over 2,000 gardening plots of 50 square meters each. And those gardens are being used by some 2,000 inhabitants of the city on some 23 hectares of land overall. The gardening plots are being given free of charge to the citizens, to people who live near the specific garden, and to people who can prove sort of poor social status or retired people. So there is this social component of giving those urban gardens in a way to improve the citizens' health and well-being, and of course the mental health of the citizens, which is a concern that's been addressed more and more in recent times. So in these pictures, I wanted to show you how these city gardens are actually being used by people, by their children. They are a success. There's always a need for more urban gardens. They are very near the city center, very accessible. So the people have the opportunity to grow their own food, fruits, vegetables, spices, and flowers for their own needs. So the land is given free of charge, and what is important, there is no economic model. These fruits and vegetables are for the citizens' own consumption. It's something that's being given to them, and they are very happy to use it. So here are some more pictures of people using the city gardens there. I need to stress that those gardens are being tended to following the biological gardening principles. They are not allowed, the citizens are not allowed to use pesticides, or at least if they use them, they use biological ones. This is in a way contributing to the biodiversity in the city and to healthy lifestyle in the city. So here are some fruits of the gardens. So following up the City Gardens project, the city of Zagreb in 2018 has joined forces of the Horizon 2020 project called ProGREG, or a productive green infrastructure for post-industrial urban regeneration. So Zagreb, along with Dortmund, Torino, and the Chinese city of Ningbo, is one of the front-runner cities of the project. And the aim of the project is to give new life to old industrial parts of cities, but using green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. So here you can see an aerial view of this part of the city. It's in the eastern suburb of Sesvete, and it used to be meat production and meat production plant, and it hasn't been used for some 20 years. So the citizens of Sesvete want to reclaim this area. They want to bring some new meaning to it. Of course, in the long run, some of the industrial buildings, probably not all, will be demolished. But as first step, the city has decided to use this very soft and gentle approach of introducing the nature-based solutions as a way of easing people back into this area. So during the course of the ProGREG project, there were a couple of co-design workshops that were moderated by ICLEI, and that turned out to be very successful in defining the future use of this area. And before talking about therapeutic garden, that is what we want to present, this is also one of the nature-based solutions that is being implemented in Zagreb next to the therapeutic garden right now. It's a modular urban farm with green walls and a green roof. You see here the setting up of the green wall, and inside the urban farm there is an aquaponic installation that has just started working like a couple of days ago. So I'm sure you will hear more about it right now. I just wanted to give you an outline of just to show you what this area looks like. So you have the silo buildings in the background, which is not very human friendly, and we have this new, very subtle, very small scale intervention that has the idea of bringing people into the area, and so what I already said, reclaiming the area for the citizens. So some more detail. And now, as the city garden project was becoming more and more successful throughout the years, the people in the area and in the whole city have been approaching the City Office of Agriculture, and they have been asking if there was a possibility to set up a garden for people with disabilities, like with raised beds and stuff like that. So this is actually what we came up during the co-design process. We didn't have it in the beginning of the project. We decided that we should have a therapeutic garden instead of a new urban garden that was originally the plan. And I also have to mention that another therapeutic garden was planned in another part of the city, but because of the COVID situation and because of the 2 strong earthquakes that we had in last year, the city budget had to be shifted in a way, and this project was postponed. So this is why we are especially happy that through the ProGREG project we did manage to implement this new therapeutic garden. So these are the children of the Little Home daycare center for children with disabilities, which is the main partner for the city in managing the the therapeutic garden, which was designed with the help of the people who will be the prospect users. One of them is the children of Little Home. So the idea was to plan the therapeutic garden to be useful to as many prospective users as possible, especially those in the area. So the therapeutic garden has been built, the building started in March and it was finished in May this year. So we are really happy how it turned out, and it has been in use since June. So the people, the children from Little Home and the grown-ups from several communities and several institutions in the area and from the whole city they made a plan of using the garden. So it's been used every day. So the raised beds have been given to different institutions, and with the help of the therapists, the users are doing the gardening quite actively since June, and they plan to do it in the future. So this is just to give you an overview. This is like a sensory path where the people, where the users take off their shoes and then they walk on different kinds of surfaces, and if they have trouble walking, they have this handrail, so to help them. And these are the pictures that really make me happy when I see them, because the point of this garden is to be used by the people with disabilities, and as you can see, they are being used. And those vegetables that they planted from when this was taken have grown in the meantime. And if I had to choose one image to go with this whole thing that I'm talking about, maybe this one would be the most powerful, because you see this almost post-apocalyptic background, and those people who show so much hope and courage in reclaiming this land, in making something powerful and something useful and something better from a previously derelict land. So I think this is it from us.
Thank you, Eva. I think this is really an inspiring example of what can be done, obviously in a very difficult context, as a deindustrializing city often has quite other priorities. First of all, creating new workspace. And this very often means that disadvantaged groups find it more difficult to find their space in a city which needs to reinvent itself from an economic point of view. No? Two things I wanted to say. Obviously, the relation to my questions are, the relation to climate change is obvious. Enhancing green spaces, as we heard this morning, in any case, will help surviving heat and making cities more livable, also under different climate conditions. What were the specific conditions you see, as you are also inside the city administration, which made these things happen? So the city was available for endeavoring in the project with a certain setting or with a certain mindset. What was that? How would you describe that as a condition for starting something like that?
I think the very good basis point for this particular situation was the successful and very active city gardens, the urban gardens project, where a team was sort of set up of people who were happy to overcome any sort of obstacle in implementing something that's very useful to the citizens, that obviously the benefits are really apparent, and there is no need to explain them. They are really obvious here. So in implementing the Urban Gardens project for the past 8 years, team has been sort of put together of people who want and who can produce something, and who are happy to do something to benefit the whole community. And of course, we were also helped very much by the Project and by the ICLEI, who were helping us in this co-design process, which was crucial to defining this therapeutic garden in this exact area.
So you were working also with civil society in Zagreb for defining these.
Well, the civil society was involved in the beginning of the Urban Gardens project. And later in the co-design process, there was the more important aspect was including the prospective users, and they are being sort of gathered through institutions, city-owned, state-owned institutions that are taking care of them, that are doing day-to-day work, therapy, and everything. So this is. The civil society was important in the very beginning, and later these institutions were probably crucial.
And where do you see the perspectives for upscaling in Zagreb or in other contexts?
Well, what I think what could be the benefit and what could be like the growth potential for this would be applying this model on different places in Zagreb and in Croatia, and of course elsewhere. I think this model is it has proven to be quite successful, people are really happy to, the parents of those children with disabilities are really very involved, and they are super happy to be able to provide for their children and for the other people with disabilities the possibility to work with gardening and to give them an opportunity to spend time outside in a serene environment. And at the same time, there's also a potential for inclusion, because right now, this Friday, there's going to be a children's play staged there. So the users of the garden will be there, and also children from the local schools. So this is also sort of giving those children, those healthy children, an opportunity to learn about people with disabilities and maybe lift at least a little bit the stigma and the fear that people sometimes have towards those who are different. So these are the
perhaps
benefits.
also garden designers teach them what people with disabilities need from a garden, and have other gardens designed in that way. So this could also be a way of overcoming the exclusion which people with disabilities often have, of course.
Yeah, we hope that it will inspire other cities.
Okay, so thank you, Mattia and Eva. And our third speaker is Maria Sitsoglu from Thessaloniki. She has been she has been working with the Resilience City Initiative in Thessaloniki, and she will tell us about a project where user needs have been revealed in a different way, in a very creative way, and I liked it very much. Please, Maria, can you tell us what you did?
Thank you, Margarita. Hello from Thessaloniki. You all had an introduction from our city here in Greece from the morning plenary session, where the deputy CRO also presented that Thessaloniki is part of the 100 Resilient Cities Network. So it has developed a strategy that participation and inclusion was at the core of the strategy. So while developing the strategy a few years ago, we embraced different approaches for participation, for including people from different age groups or people with different characteristics and different citizen groups. So when developing the strategy, we had, for example, questionnaires translated in Braille language for people with who were visually impaired, or we had informal discussions with the elderly, or we went to schools and we had different workshops working together with schools. And once the strategy was developed, we kept this value of participation for implementation as well. So for the last years that the city of Thessaloniki is being through the implementation phase, we piloted different action plans that prioritize the citizen participation, and specifically the one that I would like to present today and talk about was about the inclusion of children and the children participation in policymaking and urban planning. Because sometimes we feel that children are part of everything because we all have children and they are part of the community. But if we see closely, if we watch closely, children are overlooked in the decision-making processes and the urban planning projects because they're rarely asked. There is a feeling that everything will fit for the children as well, but they're totally different citizens with different needs. So keeping that in mind, while trying to implement different action plans of the resilience strategy, we came up with the idea of developing a local safe routes to school scheme. And this idea emerged from a priority project that the city of Thessaloniki was investing in at the moment, which was redesigning the school zone around a quite big school complex, which had from kindergarten to high school, so all ages of students. So seeing this as an opportunity, we piloted a participatory process, which was actually participatory mapping together with the students, the children, and we asked them, we had a series of workshops where children were actually mapping their routes to school and from school. And through these maps, we asked them not only to map their routes, but also to identify and show us the spots that they feel that they're more dangerous regarding social challenges, but also environmental challenges. So, for example, we identified where it gets flooded very easily, or where the traffic is really dangerous. And at the same time, we also asked them to map the pleasant spots, because we wanted to also identify the hidden special quality that sometimes we as experts usually sometimes we overlook because we're not the everyday users there. The output of this process was quite revealing, because children, although we thought in the beginning that they will just map and show us the very attractive to us areas like playgrounds or like places with benches, they identified really important parts of the urban fabric in their neighborhood that helped in the end the engineers to identify main infrastructure challenges, such as flooding spots or major dangerous intersections. So what happened was that we did those series of workshops. We had around 150 students joining from 10 to 15 as an age group. And for the little ones, we also had them joining this engagement approach with their parents. And the final outcome was that you can imagine there were paper maps with different stickers with happy faces and unhappy faces and drawings and all this material that for sure we couldn't deliver this to the municipality and the engineers who were actually designing that school zone. But this is the contribution, this is the key value of having a cross-sectoral collaboration and an interdisciplinary group of people working together on a project. So from the more educational and engagement part, we also had experts, GIS experts, together in our team. So they took this material and converted it to GIS maps and then delivered this to the city's engineers. So in this way, the engineers actually had data, actual data to work with and inform the final school zone redesign plan. And it's really important to see that how something that was spotted as a star or like a big exclamation mark from a child that usually uses a route, a steep route to go with a bike, to show that there was a major issue when that usually gets flooded after intense raining events. So we see that although we might think that children are an age group that might give you really, how can I say that? Like sometimes it's been perceived that children can give you some less minor, less important information about the area. The observations that they have are very crucial and can actually contribute to advancing the resilience planning of the city. And this was revealed through this engagement process. So from participatory mapping process within the schools, with the school community, that was transferred in the final plans of the city. And actually this big transformation of the data and translation of the data actually change the mindset of engineers as well, because many of you might be working with cities and you will see that there is an issue of trying to convince the people working in the city why to do participatory processes and how they can actually integrate what they receive from the citizen participation into the actual plans. But finding the right language to speak to each one of the partners in this process, it's key. It's key to actually manage the user needs to be actually integrated in the final plans for an area that everyone will be using. So this was a pilot plan, a pilot action that we did in the city of Thessaloniki, and it actually works. And we had the final plans and the redesign of this school zone being informed by the children, by the data harvested from the children. And at the same time, it actually raised awareness for more things. It raised awareness about climate action because we identified the most vulnerable areas. We identified recommended routes for children to follow during emergencies from the school and to the school, and also to build capacity and also talk about choosing sustainable ways of mobility. So talking about why, if we have high quality of public spaces that doesn't get flooded, is safe from traffic, it can actually promote walking, and it can actually reduce air pollution around the school. So we feel that this project showcased the multiple benefits that you can have from citizen participation, and specifically from children, into developing more resilient policies and also planning. And I don't want to waste more time talking about it. Maybe we can elaborate further with the questions. But I just wanted to highlight that since we're talking about climate change today and the just transition, it's so important to make sure that children are on board while we are understanding the issue of climate crisis, not only for the actions towards climate crisis, because on the one hand, children are the generation that actually is going to face the most impacts from climate crisis. And on the other hand, they have the rights to actually be part of this discourse. And it's interesting to see that right after the recently released IPCC report, UNICEF published a very insightful report on how climate crisis affects children around the world, and has created a specific index for this. But at the same time, it's alarming the title that they have given to this report, saying that climate crisis is actually a children's rights crisis. And I would really like to elaborate further in our discussion on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for this really inspiring example. You already responded to some of my questions. So the city's resilience plan has already opened the door to more participative sorts of vulnerability analysis, as this has been done in this case. But I was wondering, what is so special about, what did the children see what normal city users perceived in a different way, or what was the change, or would you have any example for that?
I'm sorry, I had the sound a connection problem.
Okay.
Can you repeat the final part?
Yeah, what is so special about the children's view on a livable urban environment or their school environment, what an adult person would not have seen?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question, because children are a citizen group who have different characteristics and different user needs. So children, on the one hand, see the world quite differently, like the way that we adults see so we have a few things that take for granted, where children actually see them from a whole different view. So they can actually come up with different and innovative ideas that will make us as experts, like urban planners, to rethink the area. For example, to rethink a quite out of the box new idea of designing the space, because at the same time they also have a different they're in different scale. They see the world and the city in a different height, so they can identify different challenges that we overlook. Children have the capacity, if you give them the right tools, because you cannot ask a child, okay, let's design this area, and they come up with a plan. This is not the way to go. But as in all engagement processes, if you find the right tools, how to communicate and give them, equip them with the method, they can show you, they can open up a whole new world to architects and planners on how we are designing the space, because they see things we don't see. And they, because of their experience, and also children are are using the space in very different ways. They're walking around in a very different way that we do. Many times adults are just crossing public spaces really quickly. They're in a rush, but children are very observative. They will see things that you wouldn't notice, and they will see opportunities there. So through methods that you can, different and tailored methods to their needs, you can harvest information about the quality of space that are very valuable to the actual plan of the space.
Oh, thank you. Yes, this is really interesting. Do you think that these engagement policies can continue in Thessaloniki? Do you see space for that, or for other groups which would collaborate in a similar way with the city administration?
Yes, I definitely see this to be continuing in the city of Thessaloniki or any other cities. I think that when you actually pilot something, the one thing that I didn't mention while briefly describing the project was that it was a cross-sectoral project within the municipality. So for piloting this action plan, the collaboration from the Resilience Office, but also from the Mobility Office and the GIS department and the Educational Office of the City of Thessaloniki. So many people with different backgrounds contributed in different ways, and that helped them get a hands-on experience on how this can actually change, make a valuable change. So once they have the experience, now they are more confident of those processes. So I see them being able to replicate this process and this way of thinking to different types of projects as well. So there is a continuity. And as Stella mentioned in the morning session, they do have integrated participatory processes in different types of projects. So there is a slow change of mindset when delivering projects, and specifically for schools, they have moved forward after this action plan that we implemented 2 years ago. Now, in general, I think that it's very important that the administration staff from city authorities and the engineers have an open mind on embracing more participatory approaches and understanding why it is valuable, understanding that when you are actually conducting a participatory process, it doesn't mean that you are not the expert. You are the expert there, but you need to open up to understanding the user needs and the input that the everyday users can give you, and this would actually optimize the work that you've been doing. So it's very important to do capacity building workshops with the municipalities for understanding and coordinating participatory processes with all the different types of citizen groups.
And the other point I see from what you were telling is that there was a good integration between different departments of the urban administration, and across department collaboration has been established. This was not an easy path, I can imagine. And
No, and I have to say that there were many meetings before coordinating this pilot program. We baked many cookies to go and knock on doors and bring on board people from different offices. Yeah, trust me, baking can actually help. And it's creating a safe environment for the public administration as well to embrace a new concept. And they can feel safe, that they are not feeling that they are criticized of not doing this, and trying to learn something new.
Yeah, I think this is also an important contribution to as a form of as an advice for how to scale up initiatives like that and successful resilience initiatives. So I would like to, Luca, can you start? No, perhaps I start with the first question, which is to Ruth, because Ruth already mentioned intergenerational justice as one of the issues they had very much at the heart of their initiative in Glasgow. Whether she can illustrate a bit better what that meant for initiatives and for the strategy.
Great, thanks. Yeah, it's a really important issue, and I think it's part of setting the agenda for that to be discussed. Thinking, how will the policies that we're making now affect citizens of the future, and also involving citizens in those conversations as well in a participative way. So it's great to hear from Maria about your approach. So a lot of it is about sort of building on the sort of visioning to think about what will the place look like for the future, what will it look like for future generations, and how will today's policies take account of those. And I think it's so broad and wide-ranging, it's different approaches in different contexts. But I think the important thing is that as part of the actions we're taking, that's embedded as an important consideration. It's also conversations starting to happen in different initiatives around more than human as well. So thinking not just of the human species, but thinking of what are the implications of today's policies and today's actions for the natural environment and other species as well. So I'm very much anticipating that the sort of going into the reality and what it looks like on the ground will happen through the flagship actions that I was describing for the city region. And I think it's really setting the direction of travel to say that these are important considerations, and to have that participative approach in terms of what do citizens, what does society, what do communities, what are their aspirations, what's important to them to protect for the future, what might the alternatives look like. So it's quite a lot of that is the visioning and understanding the implications.
So the visioning exercise with citizens to help to understand what future generations would need and how to respect their needs. Luca, can you please go ahead with questions we received from participants online?
Sure. We have a first question that I think can be addressed by all speakers, and it's more on the methodologies for participatory processes. And so Maxime is asking, should I go top-down, so from municipality or utility level, or bottom-up, so from citizen providers to initiate these processes? And what should be my team? So in which format to do this process? So if starting with one-to-one meetings, or more involving like multi-stakeholders in workshops or in conferences. So yes, this is the question.
Ruth, can you start, and then we pass the question to the other two?
I think it's all of the above. I think to achieve the transformation we need to use every entry route possible, every tool that we can, to be thinking about how to take those more inclusive approaches and participation. One of the tools we've been using in Scotland is a place standard tool, which is about placemaking, and then we're adapting that to use that with a climate lens. And that's being used with a whole range of scales and different organisations. So with community groups, with voluntary sector, and with institutions as well, to think more holistically about place and to bring climate into that. And those sorts of tools can be really helpful because they're more engaging. It sort of builds up a sense of momentum and sense of interest by being part of something and using those tools that exist. But I think all entry routes are needed if we're going to scale up and see that change that we need.
Eva?
Okay.
Maybe I can
Mattia.
jump in. Either and one participation is better than neither one. So, and it is actually process. One workshop cannot solve the situation. It's a process that lasts for several years, and several actions and interventions are required for a successful result. And I would say if people don't see the result in the end, they lost their interest in the participation process. So it's important what you promise that you actually finished in the end. So I would say that combination of each approach is most appreciated. And in this pandemic period, it's hard to organize workshops. So also you need to use all tools for make participation process online. but also in life.
Which I can imagine to be very, very challenging, especially if you do not want to reach the normal suspects of such participation processes, no? Because there are certain groups of population which are available for this type of exercise, and you put a poster in the area and they will come. But for others, you really need to go there. And you need to have different strategies as the one described by Maria, and perhaps she can also respond on that, have different tools to help them express what they want to do and what their needs are. So it's not always such a straightforward thing. And I heard already somebody saying sometimes a bad participation is worse than nothing because then people who have not had the chance to have their voice heard inside the participation process are more frustrated and feel even less powerless and are less powerless than if it was not negotiated within such a participation process. But Maria, what are your thoughts on that?
I would totally agree with all of you, and I think it is it goes both ways. Like you can say that you can go top down or bottom up, but you cannot go one way, because on the one hand you need, of course, bottom up because you need the people, but at the same time you need to go to meet the administration and convince them, because without political will you are promising something to the community that is not going to happen. So you need to find in the middle, you need everyone on the table. But the thing that the key element here is to define the ways you're going to approach its different groups. So you're approaching in a different way the administration and in a different way the community. But at the same time, it's so important to the inclusion in those participation processes, because there are those loud voices that they usually get in the front and they put their opinion on the top. But in order to overcome challenges and reach out to people or different groups that are not easily engaged, because sometimes they don't get the information. Sometimes there are language barriers, there are ability barriers or age barriers. Then you need to find your key partners, the people who are actually working with them, who are close to them, that they can deliver the message and they can work with you. So it's important to say that the participatory approach, a participatory process, is a long process. And we need to invest, you need to invest time and resources when planning it and actually planning to implement this. Because you cannot say that one questionnaire, and especially now during the pandemic that we're using mostly digital tools, you cannot claim that you have done an inclusive process when you haven't considered different age groups, or you haven't considered that you have reached out to different age groups. We cannot say, I think it would be ideal to say that all the processes are fully inclusive. You cannot reach that point, but you need to stay alarmed, that you need to keep questioning your team. Have we reached out to the people who are actually getting affected? Who is affected? So the stakeholder mapping that you're doing in the beginning of the project is really an important step, that everyone knows who is included and that all the different parts that are included are well informed on what we're planning to do. Like being clear, crystal clear on what we're planning to do is likely to give you a successful participation process. Because if you hide things from the people that you're approaching, or if you are not committed to what you are planning to do, then this is going to be a big failure. And not just for the project that you're working at the moment, but for future projects as well, because there is the loss of trust.
Yeah, I think this is a really important thing. So it's not only about participation, but about participation with the background of openness towards the needs and not knowing everything from the top-down position of I have mapped the vulnerable groups, and from my statistics, I know they are living in this area rather than in that one. But what are the points of view from the audience here in the room? Which Birgit?
Maria, you just mentioned that it is time and resource intensive, and you cannot just make one tiny action and then it rolls. If you would be at the beginning in a city to switch to such co-creation and participatory approach, you probably cannot take big steps right from the beginning. What would it be you would start with? Do you have any advice?
That's a difficult question. But yeah, we all need to start from somewhere. And of course, it's not going to be the perfect one from the beginning. So I think that from the perspective of a municipality, so if a municipality wants to begin such a process, they first of all need to make sure that they're collaborating within the municipality. They need to make sure, like, have a concrete idea what you want to do. So if you know exactly the project, it can be a very small scale project with a very small ambition. It doesn't have to be a great project or for a big change. We can start small and test ideas. So it's a trial and error, because in every community is going different. So I think that the idea is to have a team, a committed team, have a certain purpose, like a very concrete purpose, small scale purpose, and then try to reach out to the communities. But it's important also for municipalities to know that it doesn't work if they just invite people in the municipality. They need to go out. They need to go to the communities to actually engage them and also bring them closer to the municipality. So those two things, to form a team and have a specific goal, start small and go out. You need to go out. You cannot do it from your office. I think that would be my advice.
Somebody else? Perhaps from other experiences you made with participative processes and reaching out to groups you normally do not reach?
Hello. Well, mine is more of a question, no? That
okay.
I think this is very interesting, this approach, but what type of skills does that require, no, from you people at the city level, but also, say, in the way we form engineers too, which are often behind this decision or structuring of these projects. So do you have any ideas of whether, you need other skills to do that, and how do we form let's say, the engineers of the future for that?
Any ideas? Yes, please.
Yeah, I think that is a very good question. And since I have a background as a university teacher, I think it's important to include it in the courses in engineering programs, but also in natural science programs, because sometimes you come across people with a very, very good background in marine biology who are working with participatory processes in coastal communities, and they are doing their best, but I mean it it should be included in natural science and engineering university programs. I think that's one way of dealing with it.
Yeah, one thing I have in mind is more sort of attitude rather than capacity, which is the one which was already mentioned by Maria and by Ruth. By Ruth, it's more implicit that the city administration knows, in order to best serve citizens, needs to have their inputs. They do not know everything, and statistics cannot tell them everything. And for this reason, also engineers need how to best design something in a special case for a person with different abilities, but also in not only this very specific case, and I would like rather to extend that to the whole society. We all have different abilities and different needs to our environment, and also our future generations will have different needs, and you are not able to know everything. You know how things, especially as an engineer, work technically, but how they will be used then, it's not about people adapting to the machine, but the machines to be adapted to the people. And translated this to a city could work now. Okay, can we go ahead with the questions?
Sure. We have two questions for Eva, actually. And one is more looking at the goals of your project. And so they're asking if what is the impact that you want to achieve with it. And so if, for example, you're looking at productivity, so if you're aiming to produce a certain amount of food for the city, or if your goals are different.
Okay, so the goal of this particular project, this particular part of the larger project, is to achieve health and well-being of the people with different abilities. So the productivity, some sort of crop of the plants that have been planted is not for the city use. The scale is too small. Maybe that wasn't apparent from the presentation and the photos, but actually the whole process of gardening is the main benefit of this project. So this little crop that they do grow, they can use themselves, but there is, in this particular example, there isn't a productive outcome.
And we have also a second question that is more looking at the engagement of people. And so they are asking which are for you some important factors that you noticed are important for engaging people, really.
You mean engaging
Making them participate in the process.
In the process of planning, or?
Yes, exactly.
Well, in our particular case here, the idea was to engage as a large number of potential stakeholders as possible, and through the discussions and through the process, the questions and the answers emerge. So you cannot, in the beginning, you cannot predict all the questions that may rise up. So involving as many people with potential connection to the area, to the outcome, to the process would be most important from my point of view. I don't know if Mate, if you agree.
Yes, I agree. As I mentioned, it was a process that lasts, and as was mentioned, mapping stakeholders in the beginning phase was very, very important, and involving them in all phase of the process. So that was a successful story in this pilot project.
And the designer of the therapeutic garden has a son with different abilities. So he was very sensitive to the whole topic, which was, I'm sure it contributed to the success of the design in the end.
Ruth? What is your recommendation for a strategy?
So can you repeat the question? Strategy for?
The strategy for engaging people in your project, in your strategy. The strategy for getting people into them. How did you get to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little different because our approach was developing a strategy for creating a strategy, rather than the, and that has been through going through our various the stakeholder groups that we work with and their own networks, or creating those networks of networks. But perhaps just talking more generally about our projects, it's about really understanding where the power balances are, looking at the local interests and who has power and influence, who's involved, who are the key people in the place that we're looking at, and then to see what are the ways in, and who are the gatekeepers, and how can we find the best engagement processes that meet those particular interests. So it's hard to say there's a one size fits all, but I think the point that's been made earlier about not always going with the usual suspects, not always going, not going to where the voices are dominant or the loudest voices, and trying to find other routes in. But that does take analysis. I think the point Maria was making earlier about engagement needs to be methodical in the sense. I mean, yes, there are serendipitous things that happen too, and other people appear, but it needs to be well thought out and trying to reach the people that might not otherwise be engaged, but certainly going through the gatekeepers and the local champions and community champions to find those people who have an interest, and looking at the opportunities to young people, to working with older people as well. So a whole range of things. And I think the point I made earlier about working through creative practitioners is also a really helpful way, because you through that route, you reach the people who may not come, if you were talking about climate change and adaptation per se, if it's seen as a technical thing or a policy topic or something that's led by a local authority, it may not be of interest to everybody. But I think going into creative means and creative practitioners, it attracts a whole range of diverse audiences as well. So I think it's about being careful about what you're trying to achieve and taking that time to plan and to understand who and how.
Okay, thank you.
We have also another question, actually, looking from a different perspective, and more from a economical sustainability of these processes. And so they're asking, how are the costs shared, and how do you make sure there is a long-term, stable financial structure for the projects?
Oh, this is especially for Zagreb, I think, because the other one is only the experience from Glasgow is part of the planning process of the local resilience strategy. So doing a cost-benefit analysis for a strategy is in a whole is a bit difficult. So
it's always a question who will pay that since it is city projects and it is about social inclusions and a lot of benefits that Eva mentioned. The city will take over for the financial things in the future and make it sustainable and work in the future.
Yeah, perhaps if we can connect this to the previous question about the yield, and whether there are any quantitative goals connected not so much to the therapeutic garden but to the overall garden project. Is there any idea how much of the need of a family, for instance, can be covered by their urban garden, of the need for food, or any dimension like that, in order to get a hand on how important also the material part of such an initiative is for persons with economic disadvantages, for instance, or families with economic disadvantages?
Eva, do you have the
I don't have the exact figures, but I think that 50 square meters of garden, if they are being used very carefully, can provide for a family. But the users are planning their own planting and consumption. So I'm not sure if this has been tackled. It's quite an interesting question, so I will look into it myself. I don't have the exact answer.
No, I recall my grandmother had such a garden in a post-war project in Germany, and it was financed by the US, I think. So she had quite a big garden and was obliged to have also 2 animals and so on. This was really with the objective of having a subside the alimentary security for the family then. So, but okay. Let's close then. Okay, Margareta.
But I have a question to Maria, but first I will ask one from the colleagues from Zagreb. I'm really curious to know what you're going to do with these apocalyptic buildings, as you call them. Are they going to stand there? Are we going to take them away and expand the green area? But my question to Maria is, with this very successful, you called it pilot project, and we know there is an inbuilt danger in pilot projects is that they are not replicated. Because as a citizens, we are used to, at least in my country, we are used to not being asked what we think, but once the project is decided and finalized, they send it to us and they ask, do you agree? Which is an entirely different thing. So my question to you is this now a model that you believe the city government of Thessaloniki will adopt as a useful tool to also have happier citizens and maybe better ideas for how to develop the city? Replication, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, because it's the major question after a pilot, and what, like, we have achieved something and then what's the continuation of it. I would say that it was partially, it partially became a way of a process, and a process is not specifically institutionalized for each one of the school zones. However, I mentioned earlier that it changed the mindset of people in the different departments. So they are more open to perform those processes in different types of projects. So I wouldn't say, because there's a long way to go to actually make it a standard process, because different experts were included in this pilot project, and there's a lot more to be done in order for the municipality to have this process for every school zone specifically, because this was the focus area that we have been focusing. But I have to say that there is a change in embracing participatory processes in other planning projects. So in different levels of participation, and I think this is something also to highlight, that it doesn't mean that all participation processes have to be in the highest level of participation. There needs to be, when we're considering of implementing a process, we can identify and decide to which level we can include the participants, the people we invite. And to certain levels, the city of Thessaloniki has integrated this process in different types of projects. So this would be my answer. It's not a full replication. It's not a full success, but it is a success in changing mindset, which I think is a slow process. And it's the foundation for having more and more more different participatory projects coming and being implemented from the municipality. I don't know if I've answered your question completely.
Yeah, this sounds really like a big hope for the future of the planning in Thessaloniki, and sounds really as if some doors have been opened previously, and also with having a more open attitude towards relying on participation, and then about the success of which you have obtained with the school projects, which I think was also a good demonstrator for the administration that they can gain something from that. Although I think from a cost point of view, this could be more expensive than rather having one engineer sitting there and redesigning the area, and that's it now. Yeah.
Can I just add a minor comment to this?
Yeah.
I'm sorry if we don't have time.
No, go ahead. Get it.
It's important that through this process also the school and the community got more engaged, and then we're touching upon the topic of co-managing the place. So when we're thinking about cost benefit, about a different infrastructure project or the sustainability of a project and the management of the project, it's important to understand that when we are implementing a participatory process, you're building capacity to the community and the local stakeholders as well. So once they feel the ownership and the pride of being successfully and appreciated by the municipality and being part of this project, then we can see that the maintenance costs can be less because they are contributing. So it's a very holistic approach that we need to keep in mind. It's not just about the design and it's over, but when you're building this trustful relationship, then you're gaining, as a municipality, you're gaining benefits in the long term. So it's important for the municipalities to also consider this and having that plan in mind. Like the more they give, the more that they will get back from this project. This is a point I would like to raise as well.
Yeah, I think this is a very good point. Thank you, Maria. Do we have other questions?
Maybe I can give short answer to the,
sorry, Maria,
regarding
please.
the buildings. Yeah, even though they look like apocalyptic, they have some positive energies, and static of the buildings is quite good. So I hope it won't be demolished. To the co-design process, the most relevant idea was from relevant stakeholders was to transform it to a national museum. So you notice it's huge building and it's huge investment. So if you find some model of financing, I hope it will happen to be
a national museum.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I liked, yeah, this is a good perspective for or is a perspective for some of the industrial buildings, and I think Zagreb has plenty of these. And the perspective shown by Maria is very much opening also to the maintenance process and engaging with people also during the maintenance process. And this needs also to be a continuous project, because those who have participated 2 years ago will soon leave and go to university, and new kids will come up and eventually not be aware of this project, of this process. So there needs to be also an engagement in who owns and manages the place as a further perspective in participation. This was my final remarks. Thank you very much. It was really learned a lot of new things. I hope for you it was interesting too. Any further comments? You can find there's a channel for having further comments, so we can include them in the resume of the session if something comes into your mind later during our meetings here. I'll be around. We will all be around until the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day, and see you during all sessions, pauses, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much to Ruth and Maria. It is much more tiresome to be just in front of the screen, but I don't know whether you're aware of this. Yeah, you can see that we had you big on the screen, so somehow you were there, and it was really, really inspiring. Thank you very much. Thank you to the two of you.
Thank you. Bye.